The recent US proposal for a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine has been met with a swift and decisive rejection from the Kremlin. Yuri Ushakov, a top aide to Russian President Vladimir Putin, dismissed the proposal outright. He argued that the ceasefire would only serve as a temporary respite for Ukrainian forces. This pause in fighting, he claimed, would give Ukraine a chance to regroup and rearm. Ultimately, Ushakov believes it would do nothing to advance Russia's objectives in the conflict. Ushakov's rejection went beyond simply disagreeing with the proposal's terms. He criticized the very nature of the US initiative. He argued that the proposal was hastily prepared and lacked careful consideration. Furthermore, he accused the US of solely focusing on the Ukrainian perspective. This, he implied, demonstrated a lack of understanding of the broader geopolitical context. The Kremlin's immediate dismissal of the US proposal highlights the deep mistrust and animosity that continues to characterize relations between Russia and the West. It also underscores the significant challenges facing any attempt to find a diplomatic solution to the ongoing crisis in Ukraine. With both sides entrenched in their positions, the prospects for a negotiated settlement seem increasingly distant. The rejection of the ceasefire proposal throws into sharp relief the starkly different perspectives on the conflict. While the US and its allies view Russia as the aggressor, Moscow sees itself as acting defensively against NATO expansionism. Until these fundamental differences in perception are addressed, meaningful dialogue will remain elusive. Russia has repeatedly outlined its demands for ending the war in Ukraine and repairing its fractured relationship with the West. These demands have remained remarkably consistent over the past 2 decades, serving as a testament to Russia's unwavering stance on what it perceives as threats to its national security and sphere of influence. At the forefront of these demands is a guarantee that Ukraine will never join NATO. Moscow views NATO's eastward expansion as a direct threat to its security, and the potential for Ukraine to join the alliance is seen as a red line. Additionally, Russia demands the withdrawal of all foreign troops from Ukrainian soil, effectively seeking to neutralize any Western military presence in the country. Further cementing its control over disputed territories, Russia insists on international recognition of Crimea and the 4 annexed provinces as integral parts of Russia. This demand highlights Moscow's determination to maintain its territorial gains despite widespread international condemnation. Finally, Russia seeks to address what it sees as the root cause of the conflict: NATO's eastward expansion. These demands, presented as non-negotiable preconditions for any peace settlement, represent a significant challenge to the international community's efforts to resolve the crisis. The West, particularly the United States, has shown no willingness to concede to these demands, viewing them as an infringement on Ukraine's sovereignty and a violation of international law. The unwavering nature of Russia's demands, coupled with the West's refusal to acquiesce, has created a stalemate in negotiations. This deadlock has plunged the region into uncertainty and raised fears of a protracted conflict with potentially global ramifications. Amidst the escalating tensions and the grim reality of the ongoing conflict, the United States presented a proposal for a 30-day comprehensive ceasefire in Ukraine. This proposal, encompassing air, sea and land operations, aimed to provide a much-needed respite from the violence and create a window of opportunity for diplomatic efforts to gain traction. The US proposal, while acknowledging the deep divisions and animosity between the warring parties, sought to establish a foundation for dialogue and negotiation. The 30-day ceasefire, envisioned as a first step towards a broader peace agreement, aimed to halt the bloodshed and allow for humanitarian aid to reach those desperately in need. Ukraine, battered by months of relentless attacks and facing a mounting humanitarian crisis, readily accepted the US ceasefire proposal. President Volodymyr Zelensky, a staunch advocate for peace and a negotiated settlement, saw the ceasefire as a vital step towards ending the bloodshed and alleviating the suffering of the Ukrainian people. However, the US proposal, while well-intentioned, faced an uphill battle from the outset. Russia's immediate rejection, coupled with the Kremlin's insistence on its maximalist demands, cast a long shadow over the prospects for a negotiated settlement. Despite the Kremlin's rejection, the US ceasefire proposal and Ukraine's acceptance underscored the urgent need for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. It also highlighted the stark contrast between Ukraine's willingness to engage in dialogue and Russia's apparent intransigence. While diplomatic efforts faltered, Russian President Vladimir Putin sent an unmistakable message of his commitment to the military campaign in Ukraine. Donning military attire, Putin made a public appearance to commemorate Russian advances in the Kursk region. This symbolic gesture, laden with political significance, served as a clear indication of Putin's unwavering determination to achieve his objectives in Ukraine. Putin's address to the troops further solidified his resolve. He exhorted the Russian forces to expel Ukrainian troops from what he deemed Russian territory and to establish a robust border security zone inside Ukraine. This assertive rhetoric, coupled with the ongoing military offensives, suggested that Putin is far from considering a negotiated settlement that does not align with his maximalist demands. The Kremlin's rejection of the US ceasefire proposal, combined with Putin's public display of military resolve, painted a bleak picture for the prospects of a swift and peaceful resolution to the conflict. Putin's actions indicated a willingness to escalate the conflict if necessary to achieve his objectives. The disconnect between diplomatic efforts and the realities on the ground has become increasingly apparent. While the international community continues to call for dialogue and de-escalation, Putin's actions suggest that Russia is prepared to pursue a military solution, regardless of the human cost. In these challenging times, it's not just words that are needed from the West, but decisive action. The world is watching, and the stakes couldn't be higher. We must move beyond promises and step into tangible efforts. The time for talking has passed. Now is the moment for doing. Let's rise to the occasion and make a real difference. The US envoy's visit to Moscow was fraught with tension. Diplomatic efforts were met with skepticism, and the atmosphere was anything but welcoming. The envoy faced a series of challenging discussions, each more difficult than the last. The stakes were high and the outcome uncertain. Within the US, internal divisions began to surface, complicating the response to the crisis. Differing opinions and conflicting strategies created a fragmented approach. This lack of unity made it difficult to present a cohesive stance on the international stage. The challenges at home were proving to be as formidable as those abroad. Criticism of President Trump's handling of the crisis was growing. Many questioned his decisions and the effectiveness of his strategies. Critics argued that his approach lacked clarity and direction. The mounting disapproval was becoming a significant political issue, adding pressure to an already tense situation. As the crisis continued, related developments began to unfold, adding layers of complexity. The path ahead was uncertain, with many variables at play. The international community watched closely, waiting to see how events would unfold. The future remained unpredictable, with many questions still unanswered.